This is called The War on Pleasure. The war on pleasure begins in my hometown of Northampton, Massachusetts, in the early days of the United States. In this little college town lived the Reverend Sylvester Graham, America's first public food guru, inventor of the graham cracker, and creator of the healthy, plant-based diet we know today. Sylvester Graham was born in 1794, and this is where our true story begins. Sylvester was the last of his father's 17 children. Sylvester was 2 years old when his father died at 74. His mother wasn't around much either. She lived her whole adult life confined in a mental hospital. Sylvester was a sickly child. He was raised by his uncles, who put him to work in the village tavern. Each evening, Sylvester, a young child, would mop up beer, broken glass, vomit, and worse from the tavern floor. He watched as his uncles indulged in every kind of pleasure: meats with rich gravies, whiskey and wine, tobacco and opium, and sex. Their pleasure was his pain. Sylvester spent nights secretly reading in bed by candlelight. He read the famous Puritan preachers of Northampton's past. The central philosophy of these Puritans was that all pleasure is sin. The more pleasure you experience on earth, the more certainly you are going to hell. Sylvester liked this idea. It meant that his drunken uncles were going to be punished for all eternity. He grew up to become a Puritan preacher himself and devoted the rest of his life to waging a war on pleasure to save New England from hell. For Sylvester, the most sinful pleasure of all was any kind of sexual activity, beginning with the mortal sin of self-pollution, or masturbation, or, as the Church of England likes to call it, having a wank. Wet dreams, which he called nocturnal emissions, were also a huge sin. So was sex between married partners more than once per month, which Sylvester called a rapidly increasing evil. But where Sylvester broke new intellectual ground, even in the Puritan world, was in his theory that the primary cause of all of these unclean sexual passions was delicious food. He wrote in a book, "The free use of flesh with stimulating seasonings and condiments will early develop a prurience of the genital organs. A pure vegetable diet serves to take away all morbid sexual lust." The miracle cure for self-pollution was a bland diet of plain water, nuts, seeds, raw vegetables, and dry, unsalted, unsweetened whole wheat bread and crackers, which Sylvester Graham invented and became known as graham crackers. He preached in Boston and all over New England and won a big following among the mothers of adolescent boys. In a move that was way ahead of his time, he turned his superfans into customers. After his sermons, the superfans would line up to buy his whole wheat graham flour, his graham bread, and his graham crackers, and autograph copies of his vegetarian cookbook, which was called Lectures to Young Men on Chastity. And so, the Reverend Sylvester Graham became America's first great food writer, celebrity chef, and health food entrepreneur. Little did Sylvester know that many decades after his death, graham crackers would be perverted by Nabisco into salty, sugary, pleasurable treats, best known to Americans as part of the recipe for s'mores, with melted chocolate and marshmallow roasted over an open fire at summer camp, no less, the capital of adolescent self-pollution. He was the last of 17, born to a dad past 17, and to a mom who lived strapped into an insane asylum bed. He avoided flavor and sauce. He left his salad untossed. And he was sure that he was pure, and he was sure. He became a preacher man, made the pews of moms his friends. He sold them whole wheat crackers and bread and books at sermon's end. He thought he was bound for heaven when he died at 57. 'Cause he was sure that he was pure, and he was sure. There was one moment, though, with one special marshmallow, when he had s'mores. Oh, he had s'mores. Somewhere inside Sylvester Graham, there was a melting chocolate spore. In Northampton he did live and he did die, and he was sure he wasn't tempted by a cracker stuffed with marshmallows and more. And he was sure that he was pure, and he was sure. In his kingdom of crackers, no treats with molasses, no salt and no limes. In his kingdom of crackers, no meats and no whackers, no beers and no wines. Thank you. Sylvester Graham's fame peaked with the Boston flour riots of 1848, which happened after Sylvester published a newspaper article claiming that all the white bread at commercial bakeries in Boston was contaminated and poisonous, and only his own natural whole wheat Graham bread was safe to eat. The white bread bakers of Boston were not amused. One day, Sylvester was giving an anti-pleasure lecture to his fans in Amory Hall, downtown Boston, and a mob of white bread bakers surrounded the building, ready to kill Sylvester. Sylvester and his fans, thinking on their feet, fled to the second floor and dumped their stockpile of whole wheat Graham flour on top of the white bread bakers, paralyzing them with coughing fits while they escaped to a nearby hotel. And Sylvester resumed his lecture to a standing ovation. But the riots and other controversies took their toll. Sylvester became addicted to whiskey and opium, and mental illness set in. Sylvester was last seen being rolled around Northampton in a wooden cart, howling in his nightgown. Sylvester Graham died in 1851 at age 57, but his diet did not die with his body. For the rest of this musical, we will follow the progress of the war on food pleasure through the centuries. For Sylvester, a healthy diet meant a diet that earned you salvation and eternal life in paradise. Bland food was the key to heaven. For today's nutrition and health experts, it's no longer about heaven. Bland food is the key to a longer mortal life here on earth. But the substance of Sylvester's healthy plant-based diet with whole grains, nuts, fruits, and water hasn't changed for 200 years. The torch of the anti-pleasure diet was next passed on to Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, born in 1852, a year after Sylvester Graham died. John Harvey's parents came from nearby Hadley. They had seen Sylvester lecture, and they were followers. From western Massachusetts, the Kelloggs set out on covered wagons bound for Battle Creek, Michigan, where they helped establish the new headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. John Harvey Kellogg was a precocious teen, raised on crackers and water, so he didn't jerk off that much and worked his way up in the church. The church sent him to New York for medical school, and when he came back, they put him in charge of the flagship mental hospital of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It was called the Battle Creek Sanitarium. At the sanitarium, Dr. Kellogg launched an experimental culinary mental health program. He built a lab kitchen to find new ways to remove all flavor, moisture, and other appealing sensations from food. In the process, Dr. Kellogg invented a whole new category of food, breakfast cereal. His most popular creation was Corn Flakes, which had neither salt nor sugar in their original recipe because their purpose was to cure masturbation. Dr. Kellogg also invented Rice Krispies and granola for the same purpose. Dr. Kellogg was a charismatic businessman and public speaker. He was a doctor who preached like a minister. He knew everyone in town. He dressed in all white suits and sported a parrot on his shoulder. He turned the sanitarium into America's most famous celebrity spa and rehab. President Taft, Charlie Chaplin, and Amelia Earhart were all satisfied customers. Competitors to Corn Flakes soon sprung up nearby, and the breakfast cereal craze turned Battle Creek into a boomtown, and the Kellogg's Cereal Company into an international packaged food empire. Dr. Kellogg had the world on a string, and all of America was his pure cereal paradise.
Oh, in Battle Creek, where the sheets are white and all the bread is brown, where you eat whole wheat, have the driest dreams, and never skank around, where the milky bowls of toasted amber waves of grain abound, the cold breakfast savior, the non-fornicator, the baker of Battle Creek town, oh, an entrepreneur and a mental hygienist, and every other noun, pantheist and Adventist, author, tycoon, and a man of great renown, his eyes beholding the light above his feet upon the ground, his vegetable pastes keep your underpants safe, the baker of Battle Creek town, bearded preacher, child psychologist, and doctor in a gown, pop scientist and sex therapist, and man of great renown, his eyes beholding the light above his feet upon the ground, celebrity chef and eugenicist, and baker of Battle Creek town, Dr. Kellogg put the Rice Krispies and the Corn Flakes in your spoon, and he did it all just to keep your mind from poon.
Flavorful food wasn't the only enemy in the war on pleasure. Over the course of the 1800s, a movement to ban all alcoholic drinks had slowly been gaining steam across America. It was called temperance, and Dr. John Harvey Kellogg was right in the middle of it. The landmark achievement of temperance came in 1920 with the passage of U.S. prohibition. But in every city and town, Americans fought back. People distilled liquors in bathtubs, opened illegal speakeasies, and created the underground party culture of the Roaring '20s that today's mixologists still look to for inspiration. But a lesser-known effect of prohibition was to launch the biggest sugar boom ever. The backstory begins in the incredible year of 1898, when the United States, by a combination of military invasions, mass murder, and bureaucratic fraud, became owner of several tropical islands in the Pacific and Caribbean, including Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines. These islands were all full of sugarcane. Teddy Roosevelt, the most bloodthirsty president in US history, set up his New York and New England friends as military governors of these tropical islands, where they built huge sugar plantations and staffed them with native quasi-slave laborers. This was all working well for the sugar barons until Prohibition hit in 1920. The problem was that their most profitable export to the US mainland was rum. Suddenly, they needed to find new ways to sell unfermented sugar. They did, everywhere. Even Kellogg's Corn Flakes and Nabisco's graham crackers ended up full of wankalicious sugar. Nobody profited more from Prohibition, though, than a Chicago businessman named Charles Walgreen, who invented a wholesome replacement for the tavern where families could sit around together with drinks. He called it the soda fountain, and instead of hard drinks with alcohol, it served soft drinks full of unfermented sugar, like Cokes and milkshakes. Between 1920 and 1929, Walgreen turned his modest drugstore business into a mega chain of 525 branches. But not all was as it seemed. Some wily French tyrants in Madagascar struck a special deal with the US government so that their vanilla extract with 40% alcohol, same as rum, could be legally imported into the US for all of Prohibition. A Walgreens vanilla milkshake contained so much vanilla extract that it had more alcohol than a quarter of a beer. So vanilla milkshakes got 4-year-old children hooked not only on sugar, but also on alcohol. Refined sugar and vanilla weren't the only products of the tropical islands that we conquered. Even bigger was fruit. In Hawaii, the Dole family arrived from Connecticut, overthrew the monarchy, sold Hawaii to America, and built Dole fruit into the world's biggest pineapple business. In New Orleans, a 17-year-old Lithuanian immigrant named Sam Zamuri built a small banana company into United Fruit, which controlled almost every economy in Central America for decades. In 1910, when the government of Honduras became uncooperative with United Fruit, Sam Zamuri bought an old warship, hired a mercenary army of 100 soldiers that sailed off from New Orleans in the middle of the night. He landed in Honduras, invaded the presidential palace, and took over the country. Sam then ran Honduras for several years through a puppet dictator named Manuel Bonilla, who predictably eliminated all banana taxes. 46 years later, in 1956, Sam Zamuri did the same thing again in Guatemala, this time with the help of the CIA, the US spy agency, which sent warplanes to take out the democratically elected president on behalf of bananas. United Fruit would eventually become Chiquita, still America's leading brand of its most eaten fruit, bananas. The biggest marketing force behind the rise of big fruit was Edward Bernays, father of the modern PR industry. Bernays' previous work included a winning campaign for Lucky Strike that showed pictures of medical doctors in lab coats smoking and recommending cigarettes as a cure for throat conditions. He followed this up by selling American families and health officials on the idea that sweet tropical fruit, canned in sugar syrup, was healthy because of its vitamins, nutrients, and exotic origins. Big Vegetable got into the creative game too. The US government turned Popeye, the popular comic strip, into an engine of spinach propaganda. Popeye the Sailor Man was shown on a Navy boat with a can of spinach full of healthy iron. Spinach became a staple of the American household and of the diet of American soldiers in World War II. But later, it came out that the government-sponsored chemists had exaggerated the amount of iron in spinach by 10 times because of a decimal place error in their arithmetic. When the error was corrected, it turned out that spinach didn't have any more iron than any other green vegetable.
Multiplication is fun. But sometimes everyone makes little mistakes with their decimal places and mixes their tens and their ones. Popeye, your arms and your hands, please help me to understand how you are so strong if it wasn't I wrong. Was it just you all along? Popeye, where have you gone? Please come back with your iron. Teach us to fight again, fill us with might again, sing us your battlefield songs.
Thank you. Canned fruits and vegetables like soda, breakfast cereal, and coffee were once fancy products that only the rich could afford. But after the war, in the 1950s and 60s, American companies developed cheap, efficient technologies for producing, packaging, delivering, storing, and selling food at prices that made these products accessible even to laborers. This benefited everybody but the pleasure haters. Thanks to the ingenuity of a golden generation of scientists and engineers, the cheapest food got even cheaper for the world's poor, which meant a dramatic decline in global starvation. A humble University of Minnesota agronomist named Norman Borlaug and his colleagues invented new genetic crossbreeding techniques and seeds, including golden rice, that saved more than 1 billion lives around the world. This was known as the Green Revolution, and it was the apex of American history.
American food is the cherry, American food is the pie, American food is the golden crust and the bubbles of syrup inside. American food is the Frito, American food is the spork, American food is the hero who bakes brownies and brings them to work. American food is spaghetti and meatballs with red sauce and garlic cheese toast. American food is Monsanto and Eggo, Nabisco and Lenders and Post. American food is technology. On science's wings we fly. American food is the savings of capital, labor, and our precious time. American food is the hot dog that's brought to your seat so you won't miss a pitch. American food is the ice cube that drops from a slot in the front of your fridge. American food is a latte to go with a sausage muffin with egg. American food is a super big gulp and a turkey with stuffing pre-made. American food is a scientist sequencing genes so that farmers may thrive. American food is the grocery managers bettering stomachs and lives. American food is the cherry, the GMOs in the pie. American food is our gift to the world that the hungry may cheaply survive. American food is a sugar of corn and a pita of whole wheat and spelt. American food is a chunk of Velveeta that causes a queso to melt. American food is the soda that's held in a holder inside of your Jeep. American food is hot pizza that comes to your home in a hot silver sleeve. American food is a sandwich assembled in front of your eyes while you wait. American food is the Uber Eats driver who comes anytime, night or day. American food is the cherry that was picked with strong hands and big hearts. American food is our gift from the world and the people from all of its parts. American food is the popcorn and Coke in the dark, holding hands with your date. American food is for regular folks to enjoy. And the haters to hate.
That's Act 1. Please enjoy your appetizers. Welcome back, and welcome to the resistance. With great progress always comes resistance. The rise of cheap, convenient, delicious food pleasure has been wonderful for the vast majority of human beings, but horrifying to the latest generation of anti-pleasure crusaders, whom I call the Neo-Puritans. The Neo-Puritans are the intellectual descendants of Sylvester Graham. You will now find them everywhere in America, and their numbers are also growing in Europe. Unlike Sylvester, most Neo-Puritans are not religious. Many are atheists, but they share Sylvester's rejection of all pleasures that come from ordinary commercial food products. Neo-Puritans tend to congregate in college towns. In Northampton and its twin sister city of Berkeley, California, Neo-Puritans opened America's first vegetarian health food restaurants in the mid-1970s. Ever since then, they have been plotting a takeover of big food. They declare that all of America's most common and popular foods are fake and addictive because they are produced by big companies. Neo-Puritans aim to eradicate all modern food technology, from packaged snacks to fast food burgers to high-yielding seeds that make staples cheap. Without any empirical basis, the Neo-Puritans have even succeeded in getting genetically engineered seeds banned in much of Africa, where people are starving and higher crop yields are needed most desperately. The big problem, they say, is not starvation, but obesity, the opposite. Like the Puritans, the Neo-Puritans tend to be skinny white folk. They define obesity roughly as having a body shape that's different from theirs. Obesity has now been branded as a medical epidemic. This has opened a new chapter in the war on pleasure: dietary restrictions. The godfather of modern dietary restrictions was a college dropout with no scientific training named Nathan Pritikin. His secret to longevity was the same as Sylvester Graham's secret to chastity: minimize flavor. Pritikin blamed almost all human health problems on delicious food: steaks and cheeseburgers, eggs and cream, the dark meat of chicken, and even shrimp because of its cholesterol. Sugar, however, was fine. He sold millions of self-help books and opened a weight loss clinic in Miami called the Pritikin Center for Longevity, which became a fashion spa for the rich, famous, and guilty, a Battle Creek sanitarium of the 20th century. In 1976, a famous US senator named George McGovern created the US government's first dietary guidelines for Americans, the forefather of today's food pyramid, which has now been replaced by the food plate. McGovern based his official national diet on Nathan Pritikin's theories. A strict anti-pleasure diet was thus formally recommended to every US citizen in 1980 and published in the form of a brochure and imposed on all public schools and government institutions. The public jumped on board. In the 1980s, chemically modified diet products became the fastest growing segment in food, with low-fat or low-salt products often compensating by adding extra sugar. Diet Coke overtook Coke as the #1 soda in America. Bud Light overtook Bud as the #1 beer. The diet revolution was on. Celebrity chefs turned into diet gurus because that's where the money was. On TV and in their cookbooks, they hawked anti-pleasure versions of their recipes, replacing butter with margarine, white flour with whole wheat, beef and lamb with boneless, skinless chicken breast. If the Pritikin diet worked for some people, it didn't seem to work for Pritikin himself, whose heart failed young. He died in 1985 at age 69. Although Pritikin's fat and cholesterol theories have now been overturned by most mainstream scientists, they're still written into the latest 2020 dietary guidelines for Americans. More than 35 years after Pritikin's early death, the Pritikin Longevity Center remains as popular as ever, with 4.6 stars on Google. Paleo, keto, and vegan, and pegan, and ovo, and lacto, and micro, and macro. Fat-free and sugar-free, All Beach and South Beach, and Oprah, and Pritikin, Atkins, and Bittman. Pescatarian, fruitarian, flexitarian, climatarian, alkalinarian, macrobiotic, and volumetric, and liquid, and solid. Syrups and formulas, boxes and shills, a whole meal inside one meal substitute pill. What would we do without dietary restrictions on me and you? How could we eat without pies in the sky and promises we can't keep? What would we do? What would we do without dietary restrictions on me and you? 'Cause we don't care much for our pleasure. We care how we look to the people we know. We'd rather signal our virtue than satisfy urges from organs below. Eat your lettuce and celery, milk as an enemy. Senators promise you greater longevity. Ultra slim fast and its powders to mix. Plants in the morning and meats after 6. Detoxes, Weight Watchers, and grapefruits in boxes. The 4-hour body and Jarrett at Subway. Books, calorimeters, tapeworms and vinegars. Pure cabbage soups, frozen lean cuisine. Dinners. What would we do without dietary restrictions on me and you? How could we eat without pies in the sky and promises we can't keep? How could we eat without thinking of all of the glutens inside of our wheat? What would we do? What would we do without dietary restrictions on me and you? At the same time as dieting was sweeping the nation, McDonald's had developed incredible technology to provide hot, tasty meals in minutes at unbelievably low prices. This was a gift to the poorest people in America. Food pleasure had never been cheaper. Enter the Neo-Puritans and their war on pleasure. The manifesto that started the global anti-McDonald's movement was an 8-page leaflet called "What's Wrong with McDonald's?" Drawing on Pritikin's discredited theory that animal fat and cholesterol kill people, the manifesto accused McDonald's of murdering children and causing an epidemic of obesity and diabetes. The author of this manifesto was a hippie London activist named Bob Robinson. On October 16, 1985, Bob Robinson founded the International Day of Action Against McDonald's, which was celebrated by dropping copies of his manifesto at McDonald's branches all over the world. More than 7 million free copies of Bob Robinson's manifesto were eventually printed and distributed in dozens of languages. But not all was as it seemed. Decades later, it turned out that Bob Robinson was really named Bob Lambert, and that he was an undercover spy for the London police. He'd been assigned to dress up like a hippie and collect intelligence on an activist group called London Greenpeace, which was trying to sabotage fast food chains. Bob Lambert was a great spy, and he really got into playing his Bob Robinson character. He not only published a leaflet that turned the entire world against McDonald's, but he also had a child with one of the real London Greenpeace activists. Every weekend during his multi-year spying assignment, Bob Lambert would change his clothes and return to his real wife and kids a few miles away in a different neighborhood of London. The London police had Bob Lambert plus one other spy, John Dines, planted in London Greenpeace. But McDonald's, rightfully concerned, also infiltrated the group with its own spies. London Greenpeace wasn't very big, maybe 10 or 12 members, so at many meetings there were more spies than real activists. The anti-fast food movement was in full swing. By the late 1980s, Neo-Puritan government agencies, nonprofit lobbyists, the medical industry, and the mass media were pressuring McDonald's to reduce animal fat, reduce flavor, and follow the anti-pleasure principles. In 1990, McDonald's caved to the pressure by changing their magical recipe for French fries, which had been made with beef fat for more than 50 years. McDonald's substituted chemically synthesized fats that medical experts said were healthier. These were called partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, or trans fats. 18 years later, in 2008, the same medical experts reversed their positions and decided that trans fats were actually the most poisonous fats of all. The experts estimated that 400,000 Americans had died prematurely because of eating trans fats. For this, the experts, of course, blamed McDonald's and the other big food companies that they themselves had bullied into adopting trans fats in the 80s and 90s. In response, McDonald's dutifully switched to yet another blend of flavorless synthetic vegetable oils. Of course, they could never switch back to beef fat because that would violate the experts' anti-pleasure principle. If it's delicious, it must be bad for you. Bad for your soul, bad for your heart, and nowadays, also bad for the earth. In recent decades, the anti-pleasure principle has conquered new horizons. There's now fear and guilt attached to almost every wonderful experience in the world. Make out at a party and you're spreading disease. Take your kids to the beach and you're giving them skin cancer. And if you've ever eaten a beef taco, you have contributed to climate change. With every bite of pleasure, you have increased the number of tornadoes in the world. Tornadoes are your fault, you selfish taco-eating pig. Do tacos cause tornadoes? Do cheeseburgers cause gout? Do sunny days cause melanomas all across the south? Do hurricanes cause earthquakes? Do cow farts raise the seas? Are penises syringes of incurable disease? Do all the armies fighting in our bodies with their stats, counting all our risks of dying, save us from our heart attacks? Do tacos cause tornadoes? Cheeseburgers cause gout. The sunny days cause melanomas all across the south. Should we eat mashed potatoes? Should we risk going out? Is anything we do still unintentional?
infected by our doubts. Is anything we do still infected by our doubts?
Thank you. While Sylvester Graham was alive, he had only a few thousand followers. Today, billions of people are on anti-pleasure diets. You can find a health food store and restaurant in almost any major city in the world. But in recent years, the anti-pleasure diet has also fragmented into many conflicting factions. Ketos are at war with vegans, and local sustainable is battling big organic. Although Neo-Puritans may disagree on the details of their diets, they can all agree on at least one principle. Anything small and local is good, and anything from big companies is bad. So enjoying pleasurable food and drink is now officially okay for your body and the world, but only if the food or drink was made by a small, struggling business using a slow, expensive, inefficient method that ignores 100 years of technological progress and consumes far more resources than necessary. To describe the products that are slow, expensive, and inefficient enough to be officially okay for your body, soul, and the world, elites coined the word craft. Here is how I define craft. I'll take coffee as an example. A normal cup of coffee costs $2 at a 7-Eleven, and you have it in 3 minutes. A craft coffee costs $4 to $7, and it is served by a barista. In Davis, California, where I work, the process takes anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes, depending on the length of the queue. But standing around for a long time while you wait for a man with a mustache to look down on you is the honorable thing to do. It is the craft thing to do.
Barista, barista, I'm nearing the front of the line. And now I can see that you're brewing one drip at a time. Barista, barista, I see your artisanal way. And I'm hoping to buy a coffee from you someday. Barista, barista, barista. Barista, barista, I'd like one cup of coffee, and I don't need to know the grind. Barista, barista, barista. Barista, barista, I know you're an artist, but I'm starting to lose my mind. Barista, barista, you've asked me what kind of bean. But it's so early and I just need any old brown caffeine. Barista, barista, I know that I'm cramping your style. But I'm late for work and you've really been tamping a while. Barista, barista, barista. Barista, barista, I'd like one cup of coffee, and I don't need to know the grind. Barista, barista, barista. Barista, barista, I know you're an artist, but I'm starting to lose my mind. Barista, barista, you're drawing a heart in my foam. Please sell me a coffee, and then please let me go. Barista, barista, I see how you look at me.
hope the next guy in line can set you free. Barista, barista, barista. Barista, barista, I'd like 1 cup of coffee, and I don't need to know the grind. Barista, barista, barista. Barista, barista, I know you're an artist, but I'm starting to lose my mind. Thank you. A craft product, by its definition, must come from a company below a certain size. For example, a craft brewery cannot produce more than 6 million barrels of beer per year. Being craft also means rejecting popular preferences. Craft products must have unpopular characteristics that differentiate them from the common products that most people prefer. For instance, when Oaky Napa Chardonnay went from being known only to wine experts in California to being appreciated by country people in Tennessee, the wine snobs abandoned Chardonnay and moved on to Gruner Veltliner, which nobody in Tennessee had ever heard of and wouldn't like if they tried it. Nowadays, they're on to natural wine, which tastes like cider that's been left open in a barn for 6 weeks. Here's another example. In Bavaria, sometime around the year 900 or 1000 AD, Catholic monks invented normal beer. The original recipe had just 3 ingredients: water, barley, and hops. For the next millennium, everyone enjoyed their normal beer. Then one day, not too long ago, some creative geniuses in California decided that they had a better recipe for beer. Not just one, everyone had their own recipe, and everyone was different. But it all collectively became known as craft beer. Today in California, on the front lines of the craft revolution, it's almost impossible anymore to find the most pleasurable commercial product God ever gave to humans: normal beer. As the war on pleasure marches into its 3rd century, I leave you with this final eulogy. I cry for normal beer. There's less and less each year. It used to flow like water. Now it flows like frozen tears. There was once a day when all the beer was cheap. There was once a day when it wasn't judged by geeks. There was once a monk who had a great idea. There was once a monk who brewed a normal beer. It was beer, it was beer, it was normal beer. He saw God, God was clear, God sent normal beer. It was beer, it was beer, it was normal beer. It was beer, it was beer, it was beer. It is always craft beer week in California, without a normal beer tap to be found. Of our abnormal beers, we are very proud of their dark and musty barrels aging underground. It is flat, it is warm, brown and bitter, sweet and strong, tastes like soy sauce, smells like breath, makes you woozy, not refreshed. Swirl it in a brandy snifter, scratch and sniff it, take a picture. It's not beer, it's not beer, it's not beer. In the California Valley of the sunshiny days, you can have your beer in thousands of abnormal ways. But ask for normal beer in a normal bar on a normal day, and your bartender will say, which IPA?
IPA for the critics and the hipsters of the Bay. IPA for the Tesla dealers north of San Jose. IPA for the surfers and the sommeliers. IPA for the MBAs. IPA in the night, IPA in the day. IPA for the starlets and the douchebags of LA. IPA for the sea lions of Monterey. IPA for the MBAs. We've got kale pale ale, agave stout, and bacon mango sour. We've got gluten-free pork belly, marijuana nitro porter. We were freed by bearded bartenders with tats of Che Guevara from the shackles of our ordinary lager. There was once a day when all the beer was cheap. There was once a day when it wasn't judged by geeks. There was once a monk who had a great idea. There was once a monk who brewed a normal beer. It was beer, it was beer, it was normal beer. He saw God, God was clear, God sent normal beer. It was beer, it was beer, it was normal beer. It was beer, it was beer, it was beer. It was fresh, it was gold, it was cold, it was beer. It was crisp, it was foamy, it was clear, it was beer. It was the same every day of the year, it was beer. It was just a normal beer.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.